Hello and welcome to today's broadcast. I'm talking a little bit about Liz Cheney and about Newsweek and about Donald Trump and whether or not he's a thief, and if he gets office again, what might he steal from you? So Liz Cheney today, if we listen to the audio, she's talking about how she was initially pro-life, but she's come to see the harms that are attendant on states getting the right to withhold reproductive care from women by legislatively regulating them to having lower protected status than an unborn baby, which means women experiencing pregnancy complications, women experiencing incomplete miscarriages, placental abruption, ectopic pregnancies, all types of conditions that are under discussed but do occur to women undergoing pregnancy, that women cannot obtain medical care in a timely fashion. And that concerns Liz Cheney because that could be her daughter, that could be people's daughters and wives and mothers and sisters in her community. And it's come closer to home for her. She's managed to come to grips with the reality of what the so-called pro-life movement actually achieves for women, and that's harm. That's a greater number of infants born and dying within the first few days of their birth because their mothers have been forced, their hands have been forced to carry a pregnancy to term, knowing that the baby, via modern technology, has been determined to have a terminal condition. And so it's increased significantly the number of children born with terminal conditions, terminal congenital problems, and they're dying, and they're dying at a stage of their lives when they can feel pain, as opposed to undergoing a termination earlier on in a pregnancy when they wouldn't have developed pain receptors or significant brain activity yet. And so that's forced suffering on the hand of the mother, because perhaps the mother would have chosen to continue with the pregnancy anyway after talking to her friends, family, church members, etc. She might have made that decision. The family might have made a decision to carry a child to term knowing it had a terminal condition. Or they might have decided not to. They might have decided that pregnancy is hard, and to spare the child suffering, to terminate the pregnancy before the child develops pain receptors. It should be that family's choice, and ultimately the woman whose body is hosting the pregnancy. So let's have a little listen to Liz Cheney say that for herself, just in terms of touching on what it's like. Oh, there's been music playing the whole time. Whoops. Anyway, let's go to Liz Cheney. Here she is.
Because I think it's such an important point. And I think there are many of us around the country who have been pro-life, but who have watched what's going on in our states since the Dobbs decision, and have watched state legislatures put in place laws that are resulting in women not getting the care they need. And so I think this is not an issue that we're seeing break down across party lines, right, but I think we're seeing people come together to say what has happened to women when women are facing situations where they can't get the care they need, where in places like Texas, for example, the Attorney General is talking about suing to get access to women's medical records. That's not sustainable for us as a country, and it has to change.
Yes, it has to change, because when the Texas AG, Ken Paxton, himself under investigation for bribery, he paid $3 million in taxpayer money to his own staffers who whistle blew about his practices of favoring, illegally giving favor to someone who was a donor to him, and to a mistress of someone who was a donor to him and his campaign. That Ken Paxton, Republicans managed to get rid of some of those investigations, but he himself is grandstanding on morality grounds. Himself, a likely criminal, is suing to get access to women's medical records so that every woman who undergoes a miscarriage in Texas can become a suspect in a murder or manslaughter investigation. And I don't know about you, but if you have any respect for what women go through, and the travails of pregnancy and the strain that it can put on your heart, your kidneys, your various organ systems, and that women do that voluntarily with love, and that when coerced into doing so, the outcomes for the forced birth babies that result of that legal coercion, that government coercion, the life outcomes are not that great. And the Turnaway study was a longitudinal study which illustrated this, that the educational, medical outcomes for all the children in a family where a mother had been turned away from a sought abortion, those outcomes were all less positive than they were for women who did receive abortions when they sought them at a clinic. Now, if you have problems with abortion because you believe it's murder, consider for yourself when you would consider that to be murder, because there are a lot of gray areas. If a woman has a miscarriage, do you blame her and say it's murder, or do you say, oh, well, no, spontaneous miscarriages happen, I acknowledge that? What if the woman was a drug user? Then I can see you might be more tempted to say, oh, no, she should go to jail for murder or manslaughter. What if the woman had had a cup of coffee or had a cup of coffee once a week and she has a miscarriage? Do you still want a zealous prosecutor keen to make a name for himself and win re-election? Do you want that district attorney to prosecute a woman who's had a miscarriage and a cup of coffee a week during her pregnancy? She believed it was medically safe. Who's to say it was or wasn't? Hard to draw a causal line between her coffee and a miscarriage, but miscarriages do still happen frequently to women who are pregnant. And a zealous prosecutor could say, I can make a name for myself here, even if I don't succeed. I can be in the papers with this contentious issue of going, is this woman a murderer? Should she be held accountable for her actions? She should have known better than to have coffee, a stimulant. So can you see how all women who are pregnant, who may or may not have a miscarriage, are running the risk? And particularly that risk is heightened for women of color, who are often treated more acrimoniously by prosecutors and by the legal system. But it's also the possibility that your white daughter or your white self could run afoul of the legal system, could run afoul of a hospital's risk department, and find yourself in the situation where you are turned away from stabilizing medical care. So that was Liz Cheney. I have other things that I'm keen to share with everybody today. So let's see why Newsweek is trending. Is it trending because of Donald Trump? Yes, it's trending because Newsweek has at least run a correction. Charlie Kirk was trying to claim that Donald Trump charitably in 1990 lent one of his planes to Nelson Mandela. And of course, the reverse is true, as is often the case with claims made to promote Donald Trump. Donald Trump charged Nelson Mandela $130,000 to use one of his planes. His Trump Planes company was faltering. He hadn't conducted plane maintenance appropriately, and one plane had crashed, and his business was going bankrupt. Donald Trump declared bankruptcy 4 times before going on to The Apprentice. After going on The Apprentice, he still declared bankruptcy another 2 times, bringing it to a total of 6 bankruptcies. This man is a master of taking your money, turning it to dust, and then running off with any remaining funds for himself. And that was bad for America when Trump was in office, and it's bad for a potential second term. And if you stay home or vote for Trump, then you are supporting those kind of terrible outcomes for the United States again. Maybe you didn't pay attention. Maybe the media didn't draw your attention to the fact that Trump caused a manufacturing recession in 2019. And I'll just quickly bring up that headline that I often show to people. I'm just going to do it so quickly, just so you know that I'm not making this up, that Trump's tariffs are terrible for the economy, and it's not widely discussed. Here you go. Trump manufacturing is now officially in recession despite Trump's vow to boost industry. When was this published, you ask? This was published prior to COVID in 2019. And people really should pay attention and not walk blindly into a second term of someone who's increasingly unbound by laws or guardrails, and is leaning into the type of fascist authoritarianism that they've shown they were for a while now. Because in 2016, Trump's rhetoric gave clear signs of somebody willing to escalate their rhetoric against migrants, against people from Mexico. He showed that he was keen to avail himself of that tried and tested fascist strategy, villainizing, scapegoated, or vilified minority groups in order to build up energy around that, build up the energy of violence hanging in the air. Let's get these people of bringing you moral clarity. There's crime in America, it's migrants committing it. Want to get rid of crime? Get rid of migrants. And that kind of false, easy answer can whip people up into a frenzy where they cannot any longer evaluate evidence properly, and they cannot concede that this man is a con artist. Manufacturing recession in 2019. Just have a look at that. It's just above my head on the screen, October 11, 2019. Do you still think Trump was good for the economy? Look at this evidence to the contrary. There was a manufacturing recession. There were 2 quarters of contracted, of lowered growth, and it's because Trump's tariffs do not, as he claims, charge China. The people who pay the tax, because tariffs are a tax, the people who pay the tax are the American businesses that import goods from China, and they pay that tax and they pass that cost onto the consumer. And yes, ostensibly it's to punish China, but the people who are most obviously punished are the American businesses and the consumers. And it contracts sentiment, it contracts consumer purchasing power. It makes what you earn worth less, because all of the goods you consume, look at what you consume from China, look what you consume that might say manufactured in the USA, but was manufactured from parts imported from China. And you throw a spanner into the works of that very abruptly, as Trump, a performative macho fascist, will do, as at the same time as he deports a substantial proportion of America's agricultural workers, and you're left with higher grocery prices and higher consumer good prices. And that will contract industry, and then a lot of you will lose your jobs. Not me, because my job is still housewife and I take care of my own children at this point, and broadcast so that you know the risks of devolving into a fascist run state, because my family background is that my grandparents were both Holocaust survivors, and in particular, my grandmother suffered emotionally from having been on a train to a camp with her parents and escaped that situation because her parents forced her to leave them behind and for her to jump from a train. And she didn't want to, but they made her. And so she was able to survive, and they continued on to the camp. She's a Polish Jewish person by background, and we know that Hitler vilified and targeted Jews, communists. He also imprisoned people he deemed as being less worthy than others, because he was extremely informed by the fake superiority of eugenics. It's a pseudoscience that says some people should be removed from the genetic pool. And so he wanted to take Jews out. They weren't as pure as Aryans. He wanted to take out communists, his political opponents, because of course that's convenient. So concentration camps where the motto was Arbeit macht frei, meaning work makes you free, was erected above at least the camp in Auschwitz. And a lot of people were forced to work for German companies for no recompense, but ultimately were killed as a convenience, as a solution to the problem of having uprooted a whole bunch of Jewish people and other people from their lives and put them in these camps. And that's the problem of unleashing the human appetite for violence and giving a permission structure to the human appetite for violence. Is you get that. You get masses of state-sanctioned violence at a scale that's almost inconceivable to the everyday person. I've had to conceive of it because it's my family history. So I would like to alert you and warn you to the fact that Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, noted that Trump went around praising Hitler. Trump's first wife, Ivana Trump, noted that in her divorce deposition that Trump kept a copy of Hitler's complete speeches on his bedside table. And when confronted by a journalist about that in 1995, Trump said, "Who told you that?" And then said, "Well, my Jewish friend Marty Davis gave them from Paramount, gave them to me." The journalist Marie Brenner then went to Marty Davis from Paramount and said, "Did you give Trump that book?" And he said, "Well, I'm not Jewish, but yes, I did give him that book." So Trump's had Hitler's collected works. It's not a coincidence that he tries to get political support by appealing to the West and human nature, by catalyzing our protective instincts into hatred and a yearning for violence against these enemies that Trump presents to us. So the false conflation of migrants with crime, meaning people think, "Oh, so I don't like crime, I vote for Trump. He'll get rid of crime because he'll deport up to 25 million people, and then there won't be any crime left in America." That's absurdly naive. Documented migrants commit crimes at a lower rate than the born here population, and undocumented migrants also commit crimes at lower rates than the native-born population, and it's because they want to stay on the good side of the law, particularly anxious people who understand that they don't have valid legal documents to be in this country. But there's still many of them doing the work that native-born Americans are unwilling to do, and they're doing it for unconscionably low levels of pay. And they're often still paying tax because they have individualized taxation numbers, ITINs, individual taxation identification numbers, ITINs, and they have them because if you at least pay tax for a while, it demonstrates being a good citizen, and it enhances their case for then obtaining citizenship and embarking on that legal pathway to citizenship. There's not much of a pathway yet. Kamala Harris has promised to tighten the pathway to claim legal asylum, but also to allow for there being a legal pathway for people of good standing, good citizens without criminal records, strong work histories, and a history of paying taxes to apply for citizenship legally. And that's really important. And you should realize that if you've been caught up in that sort of fascist propaganda loop of saying, "Oh, yeah, but if we can get rid of crime, I mean, how dare they commit crimes?" It's like house guests, if they're not authorized to be, if you just invited them in your house or they don't live there, then how dare they put a foot wrong? It's an unfair standard to say that no undocumented migrants could have ever committed a crime, or we will just throw them all out of the country. Do you understand the level of economic harm and societal harm that would cause if Trump sets up massive concentration camps to process deporting and expelling so many millions of people? There will be people that will die. There are children that will be abandoned. Children that have citizenship in the United States by virtue of being born here, birthright citizenship, that will be abandoned at daycare when their parents are taken away by Stephen Miller's squads. You should also understand that the economy will significantly go downhill, as it often does. 10 out of the last 11 recessions in the United States since World War II have commenced under Republican presidents for a reason. And the reason is that Republican policy is often appeal to people on the grounds of professed virtue, and then in actuality and policy create deficits via giving significant tax breaks to the wealthiest, burdening the middle and lower classes with a greater proportion of the task of supporting America's infrastructure and military and police departments, etc., and not supporting social programs. Although Republicans in the 1960s, at least they were better. They understood that migration was a significant component to the engine of American growth and prosperity, whereas now migrants are just convenient scapegoats to Donald Trump's engine of fascist rhetoric. So we have other things to watch. I have compiled some of them by saving them to bookmarks in X. So we'll have a look. So first of all, everybody got that Trump definitely didn't give a private plane to Mandela. He leased one for $130,000, which was helpful to him because he was in the middle of bankruptcy proceedings for his failing airline. This is what appealing to false piety has achieved. New research is out from JAMA showing that infant mortality rates have increased since Roe was overturned and abortion bans were passed in Republican-led states. The data shows that there was a 7% increase in infant mortality, with 80% of those being due to congenital anomalies. In other words, pregnancies where a woman was forced to carry to term, knowing her baby would be stillborn, or suffer and pass soon after birth. These abortion bans cause only harm and were enacted to appease those who view suffering as a virtue to be forced on others, as they view compassion with disdain. I mean, I'm not getting behind that much the idea they view compassion with disdain, but they've been encouraged to misdirect their compassion away from the mother and towards the non-sentient unborn babies. And the babies aborted in later stages of pregnancy are typically aborted because they have terminal conditions, and it's to reduce suffering. And if you instead end that ability of mothers to obtain that type of care and make those kind of choices, you are forcing a form of torture on those women to have their body go through tiredness and sacrifice, knowing that at the end they are going to be dealing with a stillbirth or a baby who suffocates or dies in some way painfully in their arms, and hopefully receive some palliative care, but a baby who could have been whose life could have been brought to a close before the pregnancy had advanced to the stage of a baby developing cognitive activity or significant cognitive activity and developing even pain receptors. So that is the type of anti-choice forced circumstances that have brought suffering to women and raised the number of infants dying after birth. And if you think, well, that's easy, that's just a simple substitution, they would have died before in an earlier stage of pregnancy and now they're dying after birth. If you have forced a woman, she could have chosen for herself whether or not to make that sacrifice, to sacrifice her time and bodily resources. And it's not easy to go through late-term pregnancy. It's very taxing. You get very fatigued. It's hard to bend down. People can develop looseness of the ligaments around their pelvis and find it difficult to even walk. It's not easy. Pregnancy is easier for some women than others, but for a lot of women, late-term pregnancy is difficult, is challenging. But it's made easier when you do it voluntarily, when it's forced on you by the state, and your baby is forced to be born and to suffer once it's developed sentience. That is a hard thing to have taken the choice taken away from you and given to Republican legislatures who have imposed their performative morality on your family's tragedy. Someone says, forced birthers do not want to hear this. They only want to be able to continue to champion their precious unborn and oppress and control the lives of living sentient human beings. And someone else agrees with them and says, this, yes, anti-choicers do not want to face the horrors of the reality they support. They've saved no one, but have supported laws which resulted in the suffering and torture of countless people. I mean, maybe they've saved someone. But the thing is, forcing a woman to go through pregnancy against her will, you're less likely to be supporting a woman and you're more likely to be torturing a woman whose personal, financial, economic, physical, emotional choices have led her to say, no, I'm not capable, I'm not willing to support new life entering the world. And I saw a little dude with blonde hair who looks like Tom Holland, and I've forgotten his name. It's Dean something. And he made the point to a woman who was proudly announcing that she was pro-life, that he presumes she'll agree that people who have abortion are murderers. And he said, do you also consider people who have IUDs to be murderers? She was like, well, no, because they've taken steps to not get pregnant. And he said, okay, but you have agreed that life begins at conception. So when a sperm fertilizes an egg cell, then you're like, that's the definition of life beginning. Because IUDs sometimes prevent the fertilization of an egg, but they can also prevent a fertilized egg attaching to the uterine lining. So an IUD in that context is murdering a baby if you consider that fertilized egg to be a baby from the moment it is an egg fertilized by a sperm cell. So then he said, do you consider women who have IUDs to be murderers? Again, she was clear that she did not see that. But it's the logical conclusion of someone who wants to call women who have abortion murderers. And even if you want to say, oh, I don't think women who have abortions early on to be murderers, but later on in term, if you have an abortion, you're a murderer. Again, as Pete Buttigieg said, you're taking a woman in the most upsetting circumstance of her life, and likely to be of her whole life, when she's told that a child that she has carried in full expectation, she's carrying it to term, has probably picked out a name, purchased a crib, assembled some furniture, considered the merits of various bounces, looked into the risks of what is it called when babies die while they're sleeping? That thing. Anyway, the different sleeping positions that you're recommended to put your babies in so that they don't die unexpectedly. From just forgetting to breathe. Babies can forget things. Who knew? But you're supposed to put them asleep on their back and not their front when they're infants. There's a lot of reading you have to do as a new parent and as an expectant parent. But a pregnant mother is probably doing that. And a woman in late pregnancy has done some of that reading, has looked at different nappy options and considered cloth or disposable. And for a woman to then receive the news at around the 21-week scan that there's some kind of congenital anomaly and that their baby will not make it. Their baby may survive 1 or 2 days, but is missing lungs, heart, underdeveloped liver, that there's something that's incompatible with life, and that they can have an abortion now before their baby has developed sentience, their unborn baby has developed pain receptors or a significant neural cord linking their brain to other parts of their bodies. They can choose, they can mull over whether or not to get medical care to end that pregnancy now, or to continue with the labor of carrying a pregnancy and go through labor to hold a dying infant in its few moments on earth. But that is that woman's choice in Roe v. Wade circumstances. Without the protection of Roe v. Wade, you are having a woman making that decision with the government having imposed a coercive law on top of that. You can't consult with your doctor. Your doctor will awkwardly leave the room. They'll break the news to you. The scans show that your baby's missing its kidneys. Your baby's missing part of its head. Your baby is acranial. And we're so sorry. Woo, back away. They daren't mention abortion. There will be potentially legal outcomes associated with even mentioning the word. You can't suggest providers. You can't mention other states where the procedure might be available. You can't say, oh, if you have enough money to go to Colorado and you don't want to, and you choose not to proceed with the pregnancy, you can go there. They'll just be awkwardly fading away and feeling significant internal ambivalence about what they can do and how their hands are now legally tied. And do you know what happens as a consequence of that? Is that obstetrician gynecologists who don't enjoy being put in those morally compromised positions where their medical judgment is clouded by legalistic impositions from the Republican Party and from Republican voters. They leave the state where they can. If they don't have strong family ties, if they're able to, if they have the resources, they find another state. And this creates care deserts for mothers whose lives are now endangered by lack of access to preterm care, all the checks, all the scans. They can have some care from nurses and midwives, but a lot of that consulting with obstetricians and debating risks versus potential benefits and how somebody's chronic condition might cope with a pregnancy. All of those medical considerations and discussions cannot be had if you have a obstetrician desert because doctors have left your Republican-led state under your Republican-instituted abortion ban. And so you are guaranteeing more maternal mortality rates, or an increase in maternal mortality rates, more deaths of mothers, more deaths of infants, more compromised medical care for women with the misfortune to be pregnant in a Republican-led state. And Liz Cheney gets it. Liz Cheney gets that it is unconscionable to be depriving women of care in those type of challenging circumstances. Maybe people don't know pregnancy complications happen, labor complications happen, and congenital anomalies happen. You can have an ectopic pregnancy. The treatment for that is an abortion. The infant cannot grow to term inside someone's fallopian tube. An infant cannot be transplanted from your fallopian tube into your uterus. There's been Republican legislators who have evidently thought that they can get tiny little tweezers, open up your fallopian tube, and pick up a fertilized egg that's implanted, unfortunately, in your fallopian tube that will cause death, because if a baby tries to grow to term inside that tube, your fallopian tube will burst and cause severe internal hemorrhaging and you can die. That's why abortion is the treatment for that condition, because it's just unfortunate. It happens occasionally and people need stabilizing care for that condition, but the stabilizing care pardon me, involves terminating that pregnancy, terminating that ectopic pregnancy. But they can't go in with tweezers and take it and go, okay, twist, 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 detach that fertilized egg, go into the uterus, slice it open a bit, find a spot, use laparoscopic keyhole surgery and take that egg and go implant it. Flourish, little egg. Now you're in a new home. You can grow here. They can't do that. Modern technology does not make that possible. It cannot be done. If you don't treat an ectopic pregnancy with an abortion, then you are at risk of death. And physicians are aware of it. Republican legislators, not so much, but physicians know. Ob-gyns know. And women are becoming to know. Women are hearing more about those women who have perished as a consequence of untreated miscarriage complications or untreated abortion complications, and they have lost their lives due to remnants of fetal tissue growing septic. And you don't just have remnants of fetal tissue after an abortion. You can have remnants of fetal tissue after a incomplete miscarriage. It's just one of the multiple medical conditions that can affect women during pregnancy and during miscarriages that requires medical intervention, and that women can suffer and develop heart conditions, can develop atrial fibrillation, can suffer uterine scarring to the degree that they won't ever be able to fall pregnant again, and they won't be able to grow their family through their own fertility ever again, because they haven't received timely treatment for the remnants of fetal tissue in their womb, or their placental abruption, or their chorioamnionitis, or any of the number of pregnancy complications that can exist. I've been talking about that topic for a while, so I will move on. But it's a biggie. It's a biggie for me, because I'm a woman, and I also understand how the maternal mortality rate for Black women and people of color in the United States is 3 to 4 times higher for Black women than it is for white women in the United States. And look, that's a consequence of often unconscious medical bias within the field that's hard for people to come to terms with. But once you accept it exists, once you look at the studies that say, wow, when a number of hospitals were examined and their data was looked at, Black medical professionals treating premature Black babies had a much higher likelihood of those Black babies surviving. That it was as simple as a matter of change the factor of race. If you have a white physician overseeing the care of the premature babies who are Black, then those babies had a lower chance of survival. And then you can see, oh, wow, it's awful to think of, but unconscious bias was making those white physicians less invested in delivering the best care possible. And I'm sure those white physicians would not want to agree or concur with that research conclusion, but that's what the data illustrated, that pattern. that Black physicians were associated with better chances of survival for premature babies or Black babies born with complications. And all right, let's have a look at something more cheerful, which is a Florida poll from District 13, currently held by one of the most MAGA type people with serious questions of honesty and ethics around her CV. She's made a lot of false claims. Her name is Anna Paulina Luna. And this post says that I knew something was up when she suddenly started working with Biden on hurricane recovery efforts might be too little too late, suggesting that she may have seen in her internal polling results a need to appeal to more middle-of-the-road moderate Republicans who may be repelled by her overt MAGA positioning and also her tendency to lie about her own history and accomplishments. But here is the Florida poll. It's a tie for Anna Paulina Luna and her Democratic challenger Whitney Fox. So yay, vote for Whitney Fox if you're in the Florida 13 district. Harris is also slightly leading Trump in that poll as well. And I think that shows that there are a segment of the population who don't just say, I support Trump because he makes a lot of pie in the sky promises that I'm fool enough to believe. There's a lot of people who say, that dude is a threat to our democracy and we hold it dear. There are a lot of Republicans, and the evidence of their existence, of them feeling some type of animosity or opposition to Trump, was shown in the way that Nikki Haley was still attracting a vote in the primaries, still attracting up to 16-20% of Republican primary voters in states, even after Nikki Haley had been withdrawn from that primary race for months. And that was a hint that there is not a majority, but that there is a slab of stout Republican opposition to Trump. It doesn't have to be that big to make a consequential political difference in the outcome of this election. Just to have some Republicans, 5%, 10%, say, Trump is not being honest about what happened on January the 6th. He told people he'd won the election and that they had to defend democracy by going to the Capitol and be willing to attack Congress members, sitting Congress members, and even Trump's second in command, Vice President Mike Pence, in order to get the outcome that Trump said he deserved and that he had earned. And there are people who so heartily swallowed Trump's lies on that topic that they are now imprisoned for significant periods of time because Trump's rhetoric wound them up to the point of committing violence against American police officers, against DC police officers that came to help, metropolitan police officers that came to help the Capitol police officers, and eventually the National Guard that were allowed to come from neighboring states, because Washington, D.C. doesn't have its own National Guard. It's not a formalized state. So there was Larry Hogan had given permission for the National Guard to amass at the border between Maryland and Washington, D.C., but Trump wouldn't make the call to give permission, and Trump's acting director of the Army, Christopher Miller, also would not give permission for the National Guard to come to the Capitol to aid in efforts to quell the violent mob hell-bent on attacking and harming Congress members and Mike Pence. And instead, Mike Pence himself, calling from probably a satellite phone, but in the depths of the Capitol building in a parking garage, was able to make that call and say, well, I'm second in command to the commander-in-chief, and we really need that National Guard, and my life is at risk. And he was able to circumvent the actual chain of command, because Trump was so clearly derelict in his duty that day that Mike Pence was able to say, yes, whatever, just gloss over whether I'm president or vice president at this point. We need the National Guard to come. And people could see it on the news. There was so much footage of these violent Trump supporters wearing their Trump beanies, carrying Trump Pence flags, and attacking police officers with them. So don't forget that day. Do keep that in mind when you consider in your heart, how urgent is it to vote? How much do I want political violence to be a part of my day-to-day life in the United States going forward? How comfortable am I with women being unable to get stabilizing medical care? How comfortable are you picking your unconscious wife off the floor and carrying her to yet another emergency department? Only this time she's not turned away, because not only has she continued to hemorrhage, she's now unconscious. Because that's happened to people. Their unconscious wives in a pool of their own blood have been picked up off the floor of their own bathrooms and taken to hospital departments where their incomplete miscarriages have finally been treated. And they don't know if they're going to be able to have children together going forward. They may be able to use a surrogate. They may be able to if they have the funds to pay for one, but they cannot any longer hope to just procreate through the more standard method of sexual activity, followed by pregnancy, followed by carrying that pregnancy. Because untreated hemorrhaging over a period of days can not only leave you with significant trauma from all of the pain and the feeling of betrayal that your own medical systems in place have turned you away repeatedly, but also the scarring, the physiological effects of all that scarring and blood loss have left you with chronic conditions, and one of them being infertility going forwards. So if you're a man and you're comfortable with raising your children after you're widowed from your wife being unable to receive timely medical care, if you're willing to pull the trigger on letting Republicans be elected, to play Russian roulette with your wife's chances of surviving a complicated pregnancy, if you're so confident in your wife's ability to proceed without any need for medical care, reproductive care going forwards in her life, then sure, you could be confident in Trump's purported economic credentials, except you can't, because that man caused a manufacturing recession in 2019, even before COVID, even before his willful exploitation of the pandemic to try and burnish his own credentials as like a real guy, prepared to stick it to medical authorities, prepared to stick it to Dr. Fauci, prepared to stick it to the people who said masks and physical distancing were advisable to, reduce the risks of spread and, not death of everybody who contracted COVID, but death of a significant number of people, loved ones, elderly family members, but also children and young people did suffer from COVID as well. There were people, particularly pre-vaccination, who suffered significant medical adverse outcomes, and including death. Death is an adverse medical outcome, yes, but there's lots of people. And when Biden took on the mantle of the presidency in January 2021, a couple of weeks after the violent attack on January the 6th, he was handed the reins in the middle of a full-on pandemic, which you may have blotted from your mind, but which involved thousands of people dying each day. And he had to try and help improve the vaccine distribution system so that everybody could get one. Because the way you can contain a pandemic is not to just intermittently deliver vaccine to a few people. You have to have a broad spread of the uptake of the vaccine so that herd immunity kicks into effect, and the vaccine dampens the spread of COVID so much so that it can't easily find host people to continue to spread the disease. And COVID is not just a vascular condition, not just a respiratory condition, but also a vascular condition that involves microclotting, that involves an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes. And the last time I did a broadcast and said that, I had a little MAGA YouTube person come on and comment, reporting you for COVID disinformation. And I said, about what? And they said, COVID doesn't cause heart attacks or strokes. That's only caused by the vaccine. And then I was like, okay, report away, you special person, because COVID is the thing associated with significantly elevated risk of heart attacks and strokes. Various vaccines are not without adverse events, but the VAERS reporting system takes any unchecked reporting of adverse event that people can't point to causality for. They've just had the vaccine and they've experienced an adverse event. They report it so it gets listed so that researchers can comb through the data and see if there's a pattern emerging. And there hasn't been a pattern of widespread adverse events that have been worse than the actual adverse events associated with COVID. COVID spreading amongst unvaccinated people and causing them harm. So some Trump supporters have definitely lost their lives as a result of Trump's purposeful propaganda, purposeful anti-health propaganda on the topic, his purposeful mischaracterization of COVID as a hoax or as an attack by China, to just, when he couldn't deny that COVID was a significant problem, he tried to subvert his presentation of it then as a weapon to help him sell xenophobia more. And then attacks against Asian Americans rose significantly. So hoping that this helps Asian Americans who understand the threat posed by a xenophobic president who uses the tactic of empowering people through violent rhetoric and uniting them in anger, irrational anger against minority groups, that they understand that anybody could be the next target. A fascist is someone who continues to choose targets to designate as an enemy for people to unite against. So for Hitler, he chose Jews, but he also chose communists, he also chose gypsies, he also chose homosexual people, he also chose his political opponents, he also chose people in the Catholic Church or other churches who were willing to stand up and condemn this pattern of escalating vitriol and hatred against stigmatized minority groups. So they were like, hang on, it's bad that you're persecuting Jews in this way. Kristallnacht, the night where a lot of Jews were murdered and a lot of business windows of Jewish businesses were broken, that's a bad thing. So I'm going to go hang out with my children in one more minute. Oh, but I did save something. Just if you white people or even white men or anybody, any person of any color who needs to be energized to vote for Kamala Harris, to get out and vote. Because it can be people of any color, but white people are sometimes more susceptible to the comforting delusions of white supremacy. And Donald Trump knows how to tap into that and make you feel special, make you feel heard and seen, and your concerns about affirmative action, they might not think you're special anymore. And the lens of public attention might be on Black people and looking at Black excellence, and that might squeeze out your ability to feel special and cherished as a white person. Look, take it from me, you don't need it, and it's not a worthwhile trade-off. Letting a fascist have access to power results in pain and suffering for everybody. Some more than others initially, but it escalates. Look at how well it worked out for Germany to have Hitler in office, because Dresden was bombed. The world eventually took action against the atrocities that he was authorizing against people, not only in Germany, but in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in all of the countries that his military attacked and took over. Just as Russia is trying to militaristically acquire Ukraine, and they're taking Ukrainian children away from their homes and putting them in little camps and training them to be soldiers who repeat Russian rhetoric and who will be conscripted into an army to fight against Ukraine, against their own country. Again, an atrocity, a moral outrage. But let's listen to this one woman who's responding to a former Trump staffer, Johnny McEntee, and she's describing her experience with being turned away from stabilizing medical care. So here we have first Trump's former staffer, Johnny McEntee, one of the authors of Project 2025. Don't ever let them persuade you that it's not a Trump blueprint, because it is. His former staffers wrote it. His former appointee to the Office of Business and Management, Russ Vought, he's a principal author of it as well. And he's been caught on concealed camera explaining that, yes, Trump can deny it all he likes. That's fine with him because he knows he's just doing it to distance himself politically and win more votes, but that it is still the plan for after Trump takes office to try and centralize power, to get rid of anyone who's not a Trump loyalist in the administration, to get rid of the Department of Education, to get rid of the Department of Justice, to just have basically a gang of co-conspirators, people who are loyal to Trump, not the Constitution, not the good of the people, not the public interest, not any of those things, but just to Trump and the people who donate to Trump. Do you donate millions of dollars to Trump? Then you're not somebody he's looking out for. And even then, you can donate millions to him and he'll still throw you under the bus at any point at which it's convenient to him because he has no morals, no loyalty, and no consistency. You are all, including the people who are very useful to him, expendable because he's a sadist who will use anybody in order to achieve his goals of staying out of prison, sparing his own butt, and continuing to grift money, power, and influence from his followers, from anyone. You're all extractive resources to him. Let's listen to the video.
Can someone track down the women Kamala Harris says are bleeding out in part?
Present. I'm right here. I had a 19-day miscarriage in Idaho because of the abortion regulations. I was turned away not from one ER, but 2 ERs. Technically 3, because I walked into one and they said they wouldn't help me and I had to walk out. On day 8, I went to the 3rd official ER that I got checked into, and I never did receive a DNC. They gave me 1 dose of pain medicine in 19 days. I continued to suffer exponentially for the next 11 days. I blacked out in my hallway due to blood loss. I stopped eating, so my daughter stopped eating. So I had to eat with tears running down my face because it was actually painful to eat because I was in so much pain. Everything hurt. But my daughter needed to eat, so I was not about to make her not eat because I wasn't eating. I developed a heart condition called AFib. It means my heart doesn't work right anymore, and it fucks up. So if I get too excited, too hot, too much in pain, too traumatized, if somebody yells at me too much, my heart fucks up. And so I have to regulate for my heart to keep active. Otherwise, I could have a heart attack and die. I have to deal with these side effects for the rest of my life because of abortion laws. And I can't control other people's actions. I can only control what I can do. But yeah, women are bleeding out in parking lots. I actually have a pinned video of me saying they're going to just let me fucking bleed out here, if you want to refer to that. But I'm present. Hi, my name's Carmen. You can Google Carmen Brewster and find the ABC article, the Insider article. Yeah. You can find a whole bunch. BuzzFeed. But yeah, we exist.
And with Carmen's story, Carmen Brewster. So she said you can Google her. There's articles about what happened to her. So she's done a very noble thing in coming forward with her story. Some people who experience traumatic events like that just want to retreat into the comfort of their family and they don't want to share their story and what happened to them. She has a little daughter. You can hear her in that video going, yeah. And Carmen forced herself to eat so that her daughter would eat because her daughter was taking from that dynamic of seeing her mum in pain and concern, and the anxiety was impacting her daughter, and she wouldn't eat because her mum wouldn't eat. And you can see that there's women who need medical care in order to be present, to take care of the children that they have. And that life is not just black and white, whores versus saints. Life is a spectrum of circumstances and conditions, and sometimes you need to get access to medical care to save your own life or to just maximize your chances of not developing a heart condition, not developing uterine scarring, not bleeding out in a parking lot, not falling unconscious from blood loss and hitting your head and developing a traumatic brain injury, not any of these things that are potential outcomes for women refused medical treatment in a timely fashion by hospital risk departments that say Republican legislation says no. Says you could lose your license to practice medicine if you're an individual doctor, or as a hospital, we could impose fines and sanctions on you. People could go to jail for up to 10 years or even receive life sentences for exercising their medical judgment when they think a woman needs help. And in Ireland, they were able to move beyond a national abortion ban and to make abortion legal because of what happened to one Irish woman, Dr. Savita Halappanavar. She's a dentist. She was a dentist. She was pregnant with her wanted pregnancy, and at 19 weeks, she was undergoing a miscarriage. Her fetus had developed sepsis. It was infected. It was dying. There was, however, still a detectable fetal heartbeat. And Dr. Savita Halappanavar asked for an abortion. Like, can you please terminate this pregnancy? I want to live. Her husband has said that she asked 3 times. Each time she was rebuffed. And finally, a midwife said to her, this is a Catholic hospital. You're not going to get an abortion. Like, they won't give it to you. She died. She died of a heart attack following sepsis that overtook her body because her life did not have commensurate legal standing with the unborn fetus that was 19 weeks old, that could not feel, that could not think, that had an electrical signal, that had a heart, but whose life was so precious that Dr. Savita's life, a sentient grown woman trying to grow a family, could be put in jeopardy because of a Catholic hospital operating within a predominantly Catholic country that said no abortions, that tried to make a blanket moral judgment for every woman in every condition, not taking into account that the moral complexities of choosing to bring life into a world, particularly after engaging in sexual activity that is not just the idea of a woman, that is not just the prerogative of a woman to decide whether or not to engage in. Women maintain relationships and maintain romantic connections all the time, and we consent to romantic activity and sexual activity, not just based on our own lustful womanly desires, but at the initiating prompts from men, but the physical consequences of pregnancy are borne by women. And so when people get all cute about, we're going to make you pay, women, because clearly sexual activity transpired and the evidence of it is in your body, you will pay. And they suffer from the naturalistic fallacy of saying, well, all pregnancies are from God. So if you have an ectopic pregnancy, God made that happen. So you've just got to roll the dice and hope you survive this. You could have an extremely painful fallopian tube rupture and your ectopic pregnancy could cause you to die. You are not important anymore, because what is more important is that we get to congratulate ourselves for saving the unborn, and your life is less important than that. We've formalized it into law. But the people of Ireland, after Dr. Savita Halappanavar's death was reported on, and she was a young, vibrant woman, she was 31 years old, because of the coverage that received by an honest press, willing to engage with the atrocity of refusing a 31-year-old woman treatment in favor of preserving a dying fetus, of not endangering the life of an already dying fetus, that those priorities were so out of whack that Irish women who worked overseas bought tickets home to go to Ireland to vote in a referendum to allow abortion rights to take hold in Ireland. Because the story of one person told well across the press can into the hearts and minds of enough people that then people can vote in a referendum for justice for women, for just outcomes for women who need medical treatment to be made available to them in their hour of need, whether that need be a late-term pregnancy with medical complications that risk their life or that will result in a baby who can't survive with a terminal congenital condition, or if they need treatment for a hemorrhage, or if they just need not to be seen as a suspect for murder or manslaughter because they've made a considered decision to end a pregnancy because they cannot support a child in this world. And it takes considerable resources, emotional and financial resources, to bring a child voluntarily and cheerfully and willingly into this world. And if you can't do that yourself, why are you so high and mighty about coercing someone else to do it? And if you're a woman who's insistent that you so love the little babies that you have to force women who don't want a baby to carry a pregnancy to term as an I told you so, you shouldn't have ever had sex, then who are you to look ahead in your life and go, it's all going to be serene for me and I'm never going to experience a pregnancy complication, or I'm never going to experience a deteriorating relationship with domestic abuse whereby I'm scared to carry this baby to term. I'm pregnant, but it's an early pregnancy. I want a termination and I don't want to be engaging in shared pregnancy with someone who's abusing me. How dare you put yourself up on so high a pedestal that you want to pre-make all these decisions in advance for women, for all women, because you want to make sure that nobody makes the wrong decision. That would be too much for your conscience to bear. Mind your own business and develop some appreciation for the complexities of life. And don't you dare call a woman a murderer or make her a murder suspect because she had a miscarriage. Miscarriages happen all the time. Don't you dare make a woman such an untouchable patient that doctors will let her bleed in a hospital bed for days rather than treat her condition of a pregnancy or abortion complication. Don't you dare consider that, and you get your butt off the couch and you vote for Kamala Harris, and you vote to keep an exploitative fascist out of office, someone who considers you as an extractive resource and will implement Project 2025, which will end overtime pay for you, which will accede to any requests by the most exploitative forces in corporate America that want to say no overtime, no holiday pay, anything that can increase profitability for them at your expense. They might even do away with weekends. You don't know how far they'll go once they get into office and they have no respect for democracy. Does Donald Trump respect democracy? Did it look like respect for democracy to you on January the 6th when Trump's supporters incited by his repeated comments in public, on Twitter, to media, that the election was stolen from him, his lies, that he didn't lose? Did that look like respect for democracy to you? Do you think if Trump had succeeded in overthrowing the actual results of Biden's election win, and he'd succeeded in installing himself as an unelected leader, that he would have somehow reverted to democratic norms and had a real election in the 4 years after that? Do you think he would have stepped down after his second 4-year term ended, having used violence to get his second term in office, having used a plot that involved a violent arm whipping his followers up into a frenzy fed by lies and deceit that so perverted their ability to reason that they threw away their own lives, their own jobs, their own connections to their family, and risked jail sentences so that they could hit officers with poles, with bats, with chemical weapons, with sprays of bear spray and anti-wasp spray, and pull at the helmets of police officers so that they could try and poke out their eyes. If you've seen the variety of assaults and harm caused to police officers defending our capital and our democracy on that day, you can't look at me and say Donald Trump respects democracy. He would have had a fair election after his term had finished. You can't look at me in the eyes and say, I trust the man who lied to us about COVID, who spoke truthfully to Bob Woodward to say, yes, it's carried through the air, people, not just the elderly, at risk. He told Bob Woodward the truth. And what did he account for the discrepancy between what he was saying in February of 2020 on tapes and what he said to the American public? He accounted for that discrepancy by saying, well, I wanted to cheerlead for the United States. So to cheerlead for you, he lied to you. He made his closest supporters disregard all steps to socially distance or to mask, to flaunt their uncovered faces in public and cough at people because they were so adamant that Trump had told them the truth and that COVID was not real, and that they could cough in people's faces as much as they wanted, and then you were just sticking it to the lips. There are Trump supporters in jail even now for attacking the Capitol, for exposing people to biohazards by spitting on or coughing in people's faces during the worst of the pandemic and before the distribution of vaccines. You think the man who made the manufacturing sector enter into a recession, and I'm going to put that up on screen again. If you think that man is a safe steward for the United States economy, you have an atrocious failure of reasoning. This is what happened to the manufacturing industry in the United States because of Trump's performative strength. I'm attacking China. I'm making China pay. China doesn't pay tariffs. American importing business operators pay the tariffs, and they pass that cost on to consumers. Used judiciously, tariffs can help promote industry in the United States. It's true. But Trump just launched a war. He didn't want to militarily launch a war because he was hoping to get a Nobel Peace Prize, because he was jealous that Obama got one, and he didn't want a black president to have achieved something that he didn't. So because of that goal for Trump, that personal bucket list of get a Nobel Peace Prize like Obama did and prove himself to be better than a black president, he just launched a trade war. And he's on the record as saying trade wars are good. Trade wars are fun and easy to win. You can look up that quote from Trump because he said it during his tenure as president. And he put tariffs on China, on Canada, on Mexico, and all of America's significant trading partners and said, good luck, everybody. Good luck, manufacturing sector. Good luck, agricultural sector. American farmers experienced such a reduction in demand for their produce because China put retaliatory tariffs on the United States output that he had to then give them relief funds in the form of $28 billion worth of taxpayer funds. And he distributed those relief funds for farmers through big banks, meaning that smaller farmers, and particularly Black American farmers who had to use credit unions, who were turned away as customers by big banks because of what? Entrenched racism. And just an entrenched disregard for smaller accounts that have been kept smaller by systemic racism over decades. Because 40 acres and a mule never materialized as reparations for people who had been enslaved and deprived of the opportunity to earn any financial recompense for their labor for their entire lifetimes, to say nothing of having their family members stolen from them and sold on to other locations, causing... So I can just hear noise and I'm like, what is that noise? What are my children doing? Is my son vacuuming? That will be so awesome if he's vacuuming. Anyway, I was saying that the aid to farmers. Yes, so smaller farmers who didn't have accounts with big banks were less able to get access to any relief funds. So you can Google it if you want. How much was the bailout to farmers during Trump's time in office? $28 billion. The rate of farmer suicides increased. The rate of bank foreclosures on farmers increased. He is terrible for the United States. And it is a black mark on the record. And I don't even want to say black mark because why associate black with negative? Okay, it is a negative mark on the media's record that they have not thoroughly explained this to American media consumers, that he did this and that these are the consequences of having a posturing fascist a-hole in office. I'm going to show you again. Look at this. Yep, I've got to put myself more to the side. Look at this date. That is October 11th, 2019. And the outcome is an outcome that will again follow Trump's ascension to office, only worse, because he's promising even bigger tariffs now, because it's an appeal that works with uneducated populist voters who are happy to accept the moral simplicity of Trump's good, other countries bad, punish them with tariffs. the punishment goes to the pockets of the American companies that import from China. And the costs are passed on to the consumer. And inflation would skyrocket under Trump. And economists agree. You can Google it. What do economists think of Trump's tariff proposals? Economists think it will create huge inflationary pressure. Okay, that's all for me. I'm going to go check if my son's vacuuming. The number of viewers just increased, but that's okay. Please pass on this information to anyone you know or love who's sitting on the fence or who needs a push to get out and vote. This is a publication from October 11th, 2019. It's pre-COVID. It's pre-COVID. Trump caused a manufacturing recession, and he will again. If you're a man who doesn't want to lose a partner or lose a partner's fertility or to have a woman suffer unnecessarily in a preventable way from being denied access, pregnancy has become a potential manslaughter site, and doctors don't want to get involved and risk losing their licenses. Not even just doctors, the hospital's legal advisors. So the risk department, the lawyers who work for the hospital will tell the doctors, you cannot get involved. You want to save this woman, but you can't. You have to let her bleed more. She's only at 40% risk of losing her life. You have to wait until she is 90% at risk of losing her life before we can say, okay, the exception rules kicked in. We're not afraid now that you'll be prosecuted. She's clearly about to lose her life. Who wants to have that many bullets in a chamber of a gun that is playing Russian roulette with your life? And if you're a person, if you're a man with a partner who is female, who this could happen to, do you want your family intactness to be the target of this Russian roulette that Republicans are playing with the lives of women and girls? And yes, it's also girls. And yes, young pregnant women, preteen pregnant girls, and girls in early adolescence who are pregnant are far more likely to have pregnancy complications, to have significant things go wrong, preeclampsia conditions, placental abruption, etc., because their young bodies aren't even physiologically ready for the hardships of pregnancy yet. So your preteen daughter could be raped, might not have reported it to the police, might not have an adequate record that Republicans accept as qualifying her for an exception, or it might be a state with no exceptions for abortion. So your raped preteen daughter or your preteen daughter who was emotionally coerced into sexual activity, or who just made a bad choice and engaged in sexual activity and is now pregnant, and she can't get medical care for her pregnancy when she'll need a lot of prenatal care, and she can't get treatment if she experiences pregnancy complications either, or at least not unless she's really, really significantly close to death. So please take all of that away with you. These are the final few days. You can vote early. You can help get out the vote. You can go to KamalaHarris.org and look up ways to volunteer your time and your energy, because America is in crisis. This is a huge crossroads for the United States, and it has been for the last few federal elections, obviously, and this is just a continuance of that risk. How willing are you to see your communities disrupted by mass deportation and mass incarceration? How willing are you to watch as late 1930s Germany is replicated in your country? Is that what you're comfortable with in the United States? A minority group like Jews, but in this case, undocumented migrants from South America or Mexico, being vilified to the point where people are hungry for blood. And Trump supporters, who the ones you've seen holding up mass deportation now signs, those people are on board with violence. Those people are being groomed to hunger for violence. And all Trump has to do to keep them on board, to placate MAGA, is to keep escalating the violence. Soon he'll say, if you see someone you think is an undocumented worker, report them, do a citizen's arrest, beat them up. He's said he wants to give police immunity. So police can shoot someone of Latino background because they think they look like an undocumented migrant, they're acting on reasonable suspicion, and you can no longer prosecute them because they've got immunity, blanket immunity under President Trump. And heaven help you if you're caught in the crossfire as well, because there's no compulsion anymore for police to exercise restraint or watch out for cautious firearm usage, or to maybe bring out their tasers instead of their firearms. They don't have to hold back. They're feeling a little trigger happy, a little irritable. Maybe their wife has been sassing them at home. They can go out there and fire on people. They've got immunity from prosecution. Is that the America that you're comfortable with? Because Trump promised you that he was saving you from an outcome where you say goodbye to your male child in the morning and they come back as a female. Because the school that can't even give your child an Advil without your written consent has somehow managed to find a surgeon that's willing to operate for free so that the school can conduct a sex change operation on your child during a school day without your permission or consent or awareness. And Trump saying to you, this happens, and he's willing to protect you from this because he's a protector of women, even though he's an adjudicated rapist who a jury found plausibly raped E. Jean Carroll in the change room of a Bergdorf, whatever it is, that upmarket store, in a change room after she saw him, and they were both slight celebrities. She was an advice columnist, and they kind of flirted, and he asked if she could help him pick out an outfit for his then girlfriend, which was probably Marla Maples. And she agreed to help him, and he picked up some lingerie and was like, oh, should I get this? And he pushed her and sexually abused her. And that's what the jury found. That's what she's asserted for years, since Donald Trump's own voice was heard on tape admitting that he saw a beautiful woman. He felt he could take what he wanted, grab him by the genitals. You know what word I'm talking about. His voice is on that tape saying grab him by the cat euphemism. Hi, darling. All right, I better go. Oh, you want to say hi too? All right. I'll make space. Children are good, and they're good when you bring them into the world voluntarily with, I got pregnant with you, and I was happy. And it was not easy. Well, it was easier for you than it was with your brother. Second pregnancy is easier than first pregnancies. Second labor easier than first labor. Just to say that women who, yes, what do you want to say, Dad?
But not all women have an easy birth like that, which is why some need abortions. And if Trump gets elected, a lot of women will die, and their baby won't even make it. But they'll still die because it'll be illegal for doctors to give them the abortions that they need to survive. Or if they accidentally have a baby and they want to have an abortion, but Donald Trump would make it illegal.
It's true. He could make a federal ban. Hey, look, my children know about it. Don't judge me. Don't judge me.
I just got the knowledge.
They got the knowledge. Both of my children have the knowledge because honestly, their mother spent a long time talking on the internet about it. And I'm proud that they know. I'm proud that they know what's at stake. I'm proud that they understand that pregnancy is not just a bed of roses for everybody, that it can be complicated, that women should be respected as goddesses for bringing life into the world. And the flip side of that respect is respecting their need for medical care delivered in a timely fashion, unencumbered by punitive legislation meant to shackle doctors' best medical judgment so that they can't act in their best medical judgment. And in fact, they're more likely to leave Republican states and engage in something called medical flight, where they go to somewhere that doesn't have an abortion ban and they can in good conscience treat female patients and say, yep, you're hemorrhaging, you have a chronic condition, your body can't sustain a pregnancy, you have priority as my patient over gambling with the potential preservation of the life of a fetus. No, I preserve the life of my patient. And then maybe the fetus will be able to survive too, or maybe the fetus won't, but the female presenting for patient, the sentient adult woman, or even the sentient teenage girl, deserves to get medical care and not be denied medical care just on account of her gender. Thank you for listening. Oh, I've got a second head.
Make sure to tell your friends to vote if they are American citizens, because every vote helps.
Every vote does help. And it's going to be key because it's not just a popular vote you have to win in America, is it, darling? What do you have to win?
The state vote.
You have to win the vote on a state basis. You have to win through the Electoral College system, which awards different numbers to different states. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have to win Pennsylvania. They have to win Georgia. they have to win some combination as well of, well, they need Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Georgia would be good. Nevada would be good. What else would be good? Oh, Virginia, need Virginia. And blue states still, if you live in a blue state, still get out and vote, because the popular vote, the margin of that is still is important counterpoint to Donald Trump. He's going to complain, no matter what the outcome of the election is, that it was stolen from him. He's going to try and incite violence again, like he did on January the 6th. Why wouldn't you? If you're an unprincipled fascist with no moral anchor and no moral center, why wouldn't you try and once again activate your rabid base into committing violence on your behalf to help you increase your chances of staying out of jail and staying in and gaining public office again? Because when you're president, you can't prosecute him. There's a Office of Legal Counsel memo that said you can't. Anyway, you want me to go, don't you? We'll say goodbye. Oh, you want to say something?
And if you vote for Kamala Harris, then that's a vote for helping get abortions to people who really need it, and a vote for safe places for more immigrants.
Yes.
And a vote for just
and the environment,
in general,
maybe climate.
And in the environment, and just safer places in general.
Yes, because it's not very safe when you try and mass deport all the immigrants, is it, darling? I mean, we're immigrants to the United States as well. Can you tell from our accents? We're immigrants. We're white immigrants, so we're relatively safe from racist vilification of migrant groups that aren't white. But we still have hearts and consciences and minds, so we know to advocate for everyone, for justice, for legal recourse to seek asylum, for safe channels to apply for residency if you've contributed to your community for years. We support all of those things. And we understand that we have privilege, and that the responsibilities of privilege involve advocacy for those less fortunate. And we also have our own interests at heart, because a world where there are responsible leaders in power who take action on climate and action on preservation of clean air and water, livable standards, a livable minimum wage, and a functional society that allows people to care for each other and doesn't try and pit people against each other and develop violent antipathies towards groups of people based purely on their membership of a group. We know that's where we'll be safer, and that's what we want for our community and this country, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Vote and take friends to vote. And if you can, help out with phone banks, door-to-door knocking, all of the things. Thank you so much.
I love you, Mama.
I love you too, darling.